Look at my Maranta flower, you guys. Look how cute that little flower is. Look how cute it is. Oh my goodness. Do you guys want to see something funny? I'm going to repot her, I think, after this video. Look at the roots on this Maranta. It is so root bound. I need to repot this girl. Whoopsies. Hey guys. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa if you're new here, so welcome. Today's video is going to be a care tips video on my Marantas because I get asked quite a bit on how I care for my Marantas, so I figured I would do an in-depth video on how I care for them. And honestly, you guys, I find them pretty easy to care for. I know a lot of people tend to struggle with them. I have one Maranta in my collection that has struggled since moving, which makes me so sad because this plant used to be so full and now it's just so short, and I basically have lost so many leaves, and I'll talk about this one here too. And I have 5 varieties of Maranta, but I am also making more of the same pots because I have so many propagations. I recently did a video on how to propagate these guys, so if you haven't seen that, I'll link that up top because they're really easy to propagate. And a lot of you guys asked how I care for my Marantas, so I'll go over my care tips in this video and how I keep them looking happy and some little tips and tricks that I do with mine. So I'll first just briefly show you the Marantas I have in my collection. This is my Maranta leuconeura kerchoveana. Look how big it is. And it has a flower. It's so happy. And I actually have 2 of these. This is another one right here that I have. And I just made a 3rd pot because I had so many props, so I recently made another container. This one is my newest Maranta. This is called a silver band Maranta. Look at the veining on that. Has this beautiful light green center and just this beautiful silvery color. That new leaf is going to be so nice. I have the leuconeura kerchoveana variegated. So this is the rabbit tracks one that has the variegated leaves. So beautiful. And I also have my lemon lime. This is the one that has struggled since moving. It used to be so much fuller, and I'm really sad that it's gotten to be this short. And this is my red Maranta. So yeah, this one has grown so much since I have had it as well. So if you are interested in a Maranta, I would definitely recommend the rabbit tracks Maranta. This is by far the easiest one. This one is the most forgiving. I have let this girl get dry, like soil, be completely dry on many occasions. And I find it gets droopy, but it doesn't get angry at me. And it grows really, really fast. This one has definitely been my easiest. And I find that these guys don't give me a lot of brown tips. I still get a lot of browning with them, but not as much as some of my other ones. Yeah, it's just been the happiest Maranta, and it's beautiful. The design and everything, it is just gorgeous. I have most of my plants in nursery pots. All my Marantas are in nursery pots except for one, and I sit them in a cache pot like that. And that way I have like a cute little decorative pot on my shelf and not, you know, just a nursery pot. It's kind of hidden. So I will stick my finger and look at the soil. And if I don't feel any moisture when I stick my finger, probably like an inch or 2 down, that tells me that it's getting ready to be thirsty, and I will water when it's about halfway. I've gotten to know my plants pretty well, and this pot feels pretty light, but I know that I gave him water just like 2 days ago. So I'm gonna wait. I prefer my Marantas to dry out a little bit, not completely dry. So when I take this guy to the sink, what I do besides watering is flip a few leaves over just to check. If I don't see anything, then I don't have like a pest problem, but I do a quick check. It takes a few extra seconds on top of watering, but if you catch them early is the key. So I always do a spider mite check when I water. It doesn't take that long, and if I notice anything unusual, then I will treat and isolate the plant in quarantine. So it gets to a point where spider mites get too out of hand that you have to cut the foliage back sometimes, and then they will spread to other plants that are touching this plant. So, oh, I just noticed this one's gonna give me a flower spike too. Marantas flower when they're happy, that's what I've been told. So whenever I see flower spikes, it makes me so happy. I don't think it takes energy away from the plant at all. I just love seeing the blooms. It's just lets me know my Marantas are happy. Distilled water doesn't contain any minerals, so it doesn't have anything extra in this water, so I use my liquid dirt to feed my plants, and I find Marantas can be a little sensitive to the minerals in tap water sometimes, and if I have to use tap water, I will just leave it sit out overnight with the lid off, just so the chlorine especially can evaporate, and then the next day I just close it back up, and then I will use this to water my plants if I'm out of distilled. But I do give them distilled water because I feel like it helps in getting some of those crispy tips. I have used tap water and distilled both, and I know when I use tap water, I tend to get more crispy tips with mine. All right, so this is my lemon lime. This is the only Maranta that is not in a plastic pot. I potted this one into ceramic. So if you didn't know, ceramic holds onto water a lot longer, and it only has one drain hole. So this one here retains a lot of water, so I do not have to water this one as much whenever I water it. I find if you let your Maranta soil sit wet for too long, for me personally, I've seen more yellowing leaves. So just be cautious when you have planted into a ceramic pot. You don't need to water on a schedule or as often as you normally would, just because the ceramic does hold on to water a lot longer. And I do not like terracotta just because I feel it dries them out, so I do not have any plants in terracotta. I used to pot in terracotta more often, but I just found it was too drying for my plants and my watering needs, so I've taken pretty much everything out of terracotta. I just noticed my other Maranta is about to flower. I'm noticing all kind of flower spikes. My red Maranta is about to flower too. Look at that. I love Marantas so much. So we talked about water, and next let's talk about humidity. Now, Marantas are tropical plants, and they are going to thrive in a humid tropical environment. So if you live in a dry climate, these will not really be your friend. It's really hard to keep these plants happy if you do not live in that kind of environment. Now, some things you can do to help mimic that environment would be investing in a humidifier and grouping your plants around each other so that they're really close together, and running a humidifier by them so that the humidity is increased. 50 is always a good number for me for humidity, but I tend to find these actually like 60% or better. It's been relatively like staying in the 60s in this new space, and I have noticed a dramatic decrease in the amount of brown tips I've been getting. So I think they prefer a little extra humidity even more than 50, but you know, if you have really dry air, get a little humidity reader so you can see what your humidity is. You know, you can get some cheap $5 ones off Amazon, and I can link some that I use down below. And it's really good to know what your humidity is in your room, especially around plants that would appreciate more humidity. They're really beautiful plants, and in order to have them look nice and stay nice looking, you really need to have the proper care environment for them, or try to mimic it the best that you can. And there's some plants that just don't do well for me, and I know that, and that's okay. So if you have Marantas and you've struggled with them, try and change up your care a little bit with them first. I would recommend starting with the environment changes, and I feel like the watering is the biggest thing with these guys as well. Not saying everyone will tell you that and they have Marantas thrive in normal humidity, but me personally, and based off my experience with them, they prefer extra. And as far as temperature goes, it's been in the 70s in my space, and tropical plants really do not like cold temperatures. I would say even less than 65 is a little sensitive to some. I haven't let my temperatures really get below like upper 60s for my plants, so I haven't really seen how they would honestly do anything less than that. I would be cautious keeping these guys in colder temperatures, and away from draft areas or by windows, I would move them away just so they aren't exposed to that environment. So let's talk about soil. So my Marantas are in my normal chunky mix that I make, and I will show you here. It has potting soil, perlite, orchid bark, and charcoal. And this is usually a little chunky, so I will try to use more potting soil when I'm potting up a Maranta specifically. It's really healthy and good for the plant to have a good mix that gets a lot of oxygen down into the roots so that the water doesn't sit there for too long and can cause rot and other issues. But for Marantas, they do like a little extra moisture in their soils, and I will just use a little bit more potting soil to not let them dry out as much as some of my other plants. But the mix does still provide for a lot of airflow, and that's really important. So our already mentioned how easy they are to propagate and fill out. So I have actually propagated my Marantas quite a bit, and I fill in and add back into the pots to fill them out. And this new growth here on this one, this guy was giving me small leaves, and so I've cut these and I propagated, and they're now growing like bigger, fuller leaves. So that's something I do quite often to get them really full. Like, I did not buy this Maranta this full. I have propagated this one so much, and that's why it looks so full and bushy. So, and if you have like a long straggly Maranta, like how this one here is growing like some long straggly vines, I will like cut these back and propagate and add back in, which I've done quite a bit. And I have some of this one propagating, so I'm going to be adding these cuttings back into the pot to fill them out. So that's a good way to really increase the volume of your plant and pot size. If you really like that full and fluffy look, I highly recommend propagating and adding back in to fill out. Now what I do, so this leaf here on this one is yellowing a bit, and I don't like seeing yellow leaves at all on my plants. So I know this leaf is getting ready to go. So what I do is I just take my shears and I will just cut the leaf off here at the base. Let me see if I can show you. So right here where it's yellowing, I will cut here at the base and just cut that leaf off. And so that way it's gone and I don't have to worry about it or see it. Because yellowing leaves stress me out. I don't know about you guys. And so that way, one leaf from this plant is not going to be a lot. It's not going to hurt the plant. I pruned it back. You know, it makes it look nicer, and I don't have to see that. So that's what I do all the time. Whenever I see a yellow leaf, it's going. I cut it off, out of sight, out of mind. It makes the plant look healthier. I cut them off. And something else that I do that I don't really share that often is when I get a leaf that has a brown tip like this here, you can see a little brown tip forming, I will actually trim those as well, because I don't really like seeing brown tips. And so what I do is I just take my shears and I cut. I try not to cut into the healthy tissue, but sometimes that happens. And I just cut it off. And it makes it look a lot nicer. You see? Because now I don't have that brown tip. And from afar, you'll never even notice that it had a brown tip. Now, brown tips sometimes bugs me, sometimes it don't. It just depends. But if I notice brown tips and it's bothering me, I will cut them off. I trim the brown tips all the time, and I don't think it harms the plant at all. I do it very often. And so like here's another leaf that has a little bit of a brown tip. I'm just going to cut that off. So that's another way that I keep my Marantas looking really happy and full and clean, is I cut a lot of those tips off, and you may not realize it from like first glance that this plant would have crispy tips. It's because if I see them, I cut them off. Yeah, so that is it. That is all I do with these guys to keep them looking nice and staying happy for me. If you have any questions with your Marantas, or if you're struggling a bit and you can't seem to make them happy, try and change up their care routine a little bit, and just, you know, little improvements help. I recommend plastic pots for airflow, and I recommend a good draining soil, definitely a little bit more water retentive with less bark and perlite, but still add those amendments in. It's really important for airflow for any of my plants. They're always going to contain those amendments. Improving humidity, put it in a spot with a humidifier. Don't let it get too cold, and, you know, keep an eye out for spider mites, cut off crispy tips, yellow leaves. I do all the time, and propagate to fill out. Those are my tips for you guys. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this helps you care for your Marantas a little bit more. If you have any other questions or anything, just let me know below and I'll be happy to get back to you. And thank you again so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.